Hello and welcome to the sixth lecture, Industry Job Interview Questions. So in this lecture, I will talk about what kind of questions and scenarios you might face in an industry job interview. So as I have mentioned, there are several steps during hiring for an industry position. Generally, the first step is with a recruiter who will ask you screening questions. And if the recruiter forwards your profile to a hiring manager, then probably there will be a phone interview with the hiring manager who will ask you many questions to determine your technical fit and also your behavioral traits. And after that, if you are selected among a few top candidates, then there will be a technical interview where there will be technical sessions where you will be tested solely on technical ground, and there will be also some sessions where you will be tested on behavioral grounds, and sometimes there will be hybrid sessions where you'll be tested in both grounds, technical and behavioral. So there is no strict format for these particular interviews. They can ask you any questions and at any stage. Sometimes instead of a recruiter, a hiring manager can call you at the first stage and ask you behavioral questions. Sometimes they're very stringent about technical fit. So you should be prepared for different formats. Like you should be fully prepared in all the stages. Also, it's needless to say that you should rest well and stay alert. Don't get eliminated on non-technical ground, like you were yawning, or you were sleepy, or you didn't dress well, or you didn't pay attention to their questions. So these are just very basic requirements for a job interview to go well. And also a very common thing is to get a stage fright, like when we get stuck when talking to another person. When we do an interview, sometimes we get really afraid what's going to happen if we fail, or what's going to happen if we can't answer their questions. In order to overcome stage fright, what you can do is do a mock interview with a friend or a family member or a peer, whatever it is. Or if these resources are not available or convenient for you, you can make a video and talk to the camera so that you can see yourself talking. This can actually help you overcome stage fright. And these days, due to the pandemic, a lot of the interviews are not on site. Almost all of them are virtual interviews. So this is kind of easier because you can actually keep pen and paper and a tab open beside so that you can look at your notes and talk accordingly, and you can actually organize your wording. So that's how you overcome stage fright, and you prepare your transcript or let's say an audition script for your interview before the interview. And another very important part of interviews that you should use keywords while talking. When you use keywords relevant to the job requirements, it actually shows that you are interested, and you should show some enthusiasm when you're talking. Just don't talk monotonously so that they think that you are just doing an interview for the sake of the interview. And also do some research and brainstorming before the interview session. Do explore their website, do learn about the technical skills that they require, and these related things. Take a formal preparation and brainstorm. Sometimes you have to you don't have to make presentations, but if you make a few slides before the job interview, that actually help you make a composed summary on or elevator speech, and it actually really help you gather relevant information and make summaries. And again, you should be prepared for different formats. Sometimes you prepare a lot, you practice a lot on technical ground, but the interview may end up getting very casual, just a conversation. Or sometimes you may not be prepared at all, but they might ask you so many technical questions, very specific technical questions. Sometimes it might be both technical plus behavioral questions. Sometimes you will not understand what they're looking for. At the end of the interview, you may have an ambiguous sense of interview, like what just happened. So these are normal, and each interview is a learning session. You can consider these as learning sessions, and these will help you a lot for the next step. Always remember that you will take some experience points from each interview, whether you pass or fail. So let's say you are at the first stage of interview. It will be generally a phone interview, 30 to 45 minutes. And the most common thing that they ask as a first question is that, tell me about yourself. When you tell about yourself, you should be chronological. Let's say you did an MS, a PhD, and a postdoc that you want to talk about. Then be chronological. Start with your earliest degree, then the latest degree, and then your current employment. And also, just as I have said, when you make a resume, you should be result oriented. When you talk about yourself, you should be result oriented. Not only just I have been a postdoc, I have done my PhD on this and that. You should be focused on what you have actually obtained through your projects or your thesis. Or the objectives that you have fulfilled. You should be quantitative and specific. And at the end, just allot 2 to 3 sentences to substantiate your fit or alignment with this particular job, so that the recruiter or hiring manager understands why they should consider you for this job. And as I have mentioned, that due to pandemic, almost all the interviews are virtual. There will be less amount of on-site interviews, so you can use many resources. You should leverage online interview. The advantages is that you can take pen and paper. You can keep your resume open. You can keep your portfolio web page open in front of you, so that you can actually read from that. And actually, it helped me a lot during many interviews. And sometimes you will get a feel during an interview that you are not an exact fit. So you should not freak out in these situations. Rather, you should explain what kind of diversified and transferable skills you have. Let's say you have a PhD in a biomedical field, but you are trying to go for a job that specifically requires some engineering skills. So you should talk specifically about your diversified and transferable skills that will particularly align you with the job requirements. A PhD is always concentrated. An MS thesis or a PhD dissertation is always on a concentrated topic. So there will not be 100% fit in most cases for a job, but you should establish the link and connection through similar skills or diversified skills or transferable skills. Let's say they want you to use a particular instrumentation, you haven't used it at all, but during your PhD you have used a related instrument or an approach or an experiment protocol that you can actually mention. So do not be afraid to mention these related skills. You don't have to mention like specific skills associated with the job requirement. And also sometimes we want to give so many information in a very less amount of time, so we end up trying to talk very fast and we miss several key points. So you should talk slowly and explain yourself and without interrupting the hiring manager. So you should understand that it's not an interrogation, it's a discussion or conversation where you want to convey the message that you have an alignment for this job. And let's say you have passed the first round of interview, and now you have a technical interview. You have been invited for a technical interview. Generally, it's a few sessions. It might be 1 round or multiple rounds. It's generally with the team members or a set of hiring managers or other authoritative people in the institution. It may take few hours to all day. It may take 4 to 5 sessions, 1 hour each. It may 30-minute sessions, 4 to 5 30-minute sessions, something like that. Don't worry too much about the format. Just take one session at a time and focus on the particular session when you are in it. And generally there is a session with a hiring manager. He or she will ask you some technical and behavioral questions. Sometimes they will ask you very basic questions in your field, like what things or parameters to consider when you are doing this job or that job. You should discuss with them, and always make sure that you ask relevant, genuine, curious questions at the end of the interview sessions. And again, in order to overcome stage fright, you should practice talking out loud. You can make videos or talk to the camera. And also just don't make fake questions. You should have genuine questions. If you're really interested in the job, then you should have so many questions. What questions to ask, I will discuss at the later part of the video. And aside from the hiring manager, there will be an interview with technical and behavioral team who will ask you about your projects. You may have to go into detail about your projects. And when it comes to technical expertise, you should always use keywords and examples. When they ask you to explain a scenario or give you detail about a project, make sure you are using relevant keywords and examples. And when it comes to behavioral questions, generally the questions are about how do you overcome a challenge, how do you manage workplace conflicts, something like that. You should always you shouldn't talk in abstract terms. You should always give examples. And also at the end, you should discuss and ask genuine questions about the team members, about the technicalities and everything, keeping in mind that it's a discussion. And sometimes in this technical interview, there is a presentation at the beginning or end or in the middle of the sessions, or there might be a coding test if it's a coding intensive job. Then when you are making a presentation, you should make sure that you are presenting to people who do not know at all about your work, and sometimes they are not at all interested to listen to your work, about your work. So you should make a presentation at somewhat high level, keeping in mind that although they do not understand your work, they're not familiar with your field, but they are actually technical people. So you should make a compensation between getting into too high level and too low level. You should make a presentation that is engaging, that is brief, that is to the point, and that explains your work very easily understandable. And when it comes to coding tests, generally it's not a big coding test. They will possibly ask you to make short segments of code. Sometimes it's pseudocode, not particular to any language. So you should practice writing short segments specifically for coding tests. And it's very unlikely that they will test you your expertise in a particular software, but explain your fit. Sometimes they're looking for expertise in particular software because they use it in their institution, but you may not have expertise in it. Again, you don't have expertise in this particular software or skill set, you can always mention similar or relevant software skill set. That will help you make a better fit candidate. So when you are going through this phone interview and technical interview, it's very important to talk about green flags and red flags. You should understand which way this is going. Green flags are that they recognize your expertise. They are actually respectful and they recognize your expertise, although you're not particularly associated with their field. You haven't worked in their field, but you have some diversity and transferable skill set, and they're recognizing it. It means that it's a green flag, and they're considering you actively. And when you explain your fit and prospect in terms of diversified and transferable skill set, they are actually recognizing it and taking it very seriously. Sometimes in a few jobs, you will see that they are looking for extremely specific fit. You have to know this instrumentation, or you have to know this particular programming language. You have to know this particular software, otherwise you are not being considered. These are actually red flags. Another green flag is that they understood the terminologies that you have used. Sometimes in these technical interviews, you'll find someone who have actually used some software or skill set or instrumentation or experimental approaches or something like that. And when you have used the terminologies, they have actually understood. It's actually good. And it's a very good thing about a job is that if they are not too much worried about fit, but your attitude. If they appreciate your can-do attitude and your diversified and transferable skill set, then it's a green flag. And you should also be mindful about the red flags. Sometimes some interviewers will be extremely critical. They will talk to you in a rude tone, and their body language will be extremely negative. And they will talk about exact experience, as I have said. These are red flags. So you should take notes of these things so that you can understand beforehand which way this is going, and avoid some few traps during the interview. That when they're nice, especially in the academia or industry interview, or during behavioral sessions, or whether it be with the hiring manager or the recruiter, very nice does not mean they will hire you. And also sometimes very critical does not mean that they will not hire you. It may go either way, so you don't assume too much. And also sometimes their question is very long, and you should not interrupt them in the middle. Let them ask the full question, understand the whole question, and then answer. When you are answering, take your time. Sometimes you can be frustrated at the very beginning of the interview. Let's say there is a very rude interviewer at the very first session, and he or she has grounded you very vigorously throughout the interview, and you were just ground to the bottom, and you were thinking like how things will go in the following sessions. Let's say you have just been grilled for 30 minutes in a session, and you have to join another session in a few minutes. Just breathe, take a sip of water, and just compose yourself. Do not think about what happened. You can take notes and just move on, and don't be frustrated because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You have to go through all the processes, and anyway, if it's a negative experience, you can use it and leverage it in the next step. And always take time answering in detail. And sometimes they will be using very flattering language in rare cases, but you should not assume any outcome. Nice and flattering language does not mean you are getting hired. Rather, you should focus on the process, focus on answering the questions, focus on presenting yourself, focus on conveying your technical and non-technical expertise. So these are sample list of questions. This is not an exhaustive list. I have already mentioned that they can ask you about yourself. They can ask you about your research. Sometimes, let's say you have talked about 2 or 3 projects, they will focus on one particular relevant project and ask you to give you some, after giving some high level detail, you may be asked to give some technical details. So you will discuss in detail what you did in this particular project. And very common questions are, why this company, why this team, why this role? So you should actually research about the company and also the team. What do they do in this particular role? And sometimes when you are in academia and trying to go to industry and vice versa, they will ask you why are you trying to switch? And you should have a good answer for this. Let's say you are now ready for a bigger role, and you have actually obtained particular skill set aligned with this job requirement. So that's why you can substantiate your job switch. And also, this is like a modified version of the previous question. Your trajectory suggests you are pursuing academia. Let's say you have done a postdoc for a few years. Why industry now? So research for it, why it is logical for you to switch. And also, sometimes you may be asked about your particular related project. Let's say you did X project, and as a following project you did Y project. What are the relationships between these two projects, and what improvement you did in the following project? Sometimes they will give you a particular scenario or code or a situation. Let's say, how did you deal with angry coworker? How did you manage with challenge? How did you manage stressful situation or something like that? And you have you may be asked to describe a challenge or a conflict or a disagreement with your coworker, and how you did you resolve it. Sometimes many things work. Be truthful and also be detailed when you are answering. Let's say you are a conversationist. When workplace conflict occurred, you actually made an honest and straightforward conversation, a professional conversation to make situation better, something like that. And there might be like different versions of these questions, but in general, these will fall into this category. And it's very important to ask questions. Sometimes we just give thanks and just end the session. It doesn't make a good impression. You should make a list of genuine questions for all the interviewers about the nature and responsibilities of the job. And when you are asking questions, you should be mindful about whom you are asking these questions to. You should ask technical questions to the technical recruiter. You should ask behavioral questions or team-related non-technical questions to the behavioral interviewers, and something, and so on and so forth. You should ask specific position-related questions to the hiring manager, something like that. And these are the topics you can actually ask about, the technical aspects of the job. Let's say your team actually collaborate with many other teams, and it's kind of an intermediate team that deals with a process associated with other processes in the industry. So you should understand the responsibilities and the relationship of your team with the other teams, and also expertise of the team members. You should understand whether it's a very concentrated group with everyone having the same expertise, or a diverse group in terms of technical expertise, and what challenges do they face on a regular basis. What's their growth plan, short-term and long-term, quantitatively speaking, and also how you can contribute to adding value to the team in terms of experiment computation or specific skill, how you are leveraging your degree or expertise or previous job or projects in these next job, and what is the work-life balance and culture. So that's all the scenarios you are possibly going to face in the job interview in the industry. Thanks.